I'm Ali.
Hi, I'm Tommy. And we're
We're
Lovehoney.
Lovehoney, and you're listening to Rhino Radio.
Subscribe.
Let's just start things off with an easy one. How are you guys?
Oh, good. Doing
Much
good.
better.
Doing good. How are you?
Not too bad.
That's good.
The Monday in the UK.
Yeah. How is that? You guys what are like your restrictions over there?
Well, they've just loosened it so that kids can go back to school and you can meet with one person outside. That's about it at the moment, I think.
They're a little more lenient here. Like some of the places have opened up to do like activities indoors. My son went back to school in person. It's like lifting little by little.
Fingers crossed it keeps on doing that. Keeps going away.
Yeah, right. I believe so.
So let's take it back to the beginning. How did Lovehoney come together then?
So me and Tommy, we met on Craigslist. You guys have Craigslist out there? Or like something similar? And he put an ad out on Craigslist, and I was just like, for fun, like just browsing through Craigslist, trying to find people to write music with, because I don't know how to play an instrument, but I do love to sing and write. So I was just kind of looking for a writing partner, and his like stood out to me because his ad basically had bands that I love. So he had like the Kills, Black Keys, White Stripes, and I was like, yeah, me, I want it. And so I emailed him, and he got back to me, and from there we just we started talking almost every day, sending each other music, sending each other our favorite bands, and interviews and stuff like that. And I think a couple months later we agreed to meet up and hang out and just see like what the vibe was. Yeah. And he brought his guitar, and I think we went to Guitar Center for like a second, and then we went to his job, and that the day that we met is the day we wrote 2 songs together, and they came out really cool. And so I think from there I knew that there was something special there.
Yeah, I think they made the lady wanted me to take off my leather coat at Guitar Center because I think it was gonna scratch.
Yeah,
it was gonna scratch the guitar, and it was this mean lady in Guitar Center, and she was like, "You can't have your coat on while you're playing." And so I remember that was really funny, and we both laughed at her, and I just kept the coat on. I said, "Okay," and we just played. So,
and he didn't scratch anything.
Yeah, and what's a guitar without a leather coat? I mean,
yeah, come on, it's only rock and roll, ma'am.
You know.
Exactly. I mean, you work in Guitar Center. What are you expecting? To play Stairway to Heaven?
Yeah, right. Yeah. So it was cool, and that was fun too because we had like Ali said, a lot of people that I was meeting at the course where I was working at the rehearsal studio. A lot of people didn't know who the Kills were. So when you meet someone that knew who the Kills were, that was already an instant thing to be, because everyone had heard of White Stripes and Black Keys, but the Kills was cool because we would talk about how they would send each other cassette tapes when one was in England and the other one was in the States, and then that's how they were originally started working together, was just sending each other stuff back and forth via the mail. So that was fun. So that's how we were sending each other ideas and stuff like that via the phone until we met. So it was like a cool parallel between those two things that we shared, you know.
Yeah. And then there was a gap in time before the initial band actually started.
Like a year.
Life.
Like a year.
Yeah, almost a year.
And yeah, then, probably like a year.
Ooh, my phone fell. And
yeah, probably like a year. Because I met Tom, the drummer, at my job, because he used to actually work there, and he had started back working there, and then he moved back to Florida. So Allie hadn't met him at the time, so he moved back to Florida. And before he moved, we were talking about, we should start a band together. And then at that time, I ended up, Al and I was still sending each other stuff, but I ended up starting a band, but it was more soul oriented. It was like no rock. It had maybe a hints of heavier things. And that's how I met Matt, the bass player. And then it was a different drummer, Colin, on drum. So we did that for like a year, and Allie and I would still talk every once in a while and send each other stuff to check in on each other and so forth. And then, you know, the singer, he didn't really want to do heavier stuff. And we were like, and me and Matt, the bassist, we were like really into like, you know, we wanted to incorporate more stuff, just, you know, just more edgier, heavier blues. And it just kind of fizzled its way out. And right when that fizzled out, all of a sudden I got a text from Tom one day. I was at work and he was like, hey man, you want to start like a heavy blues rock band and like take over the world or something like that? It was just random, right? And I was just like, yeah, sure, man. He's like, I'm coming back to New York, so let's start a band when we come back. So that happened. And then it was like a rainy day, and I think I was off work that day. And then I got a text from Allie, and she was just checking in and saying, how you doing and everything. I said, yeah, I'm cool. You know, I haven't been doing anything since I stopped with the other band. And then she said, well, if you ever want to, you know, jam or get together and write, do stuff or whatever, let's do it. So I said, I'm free today. You want to just get together? So we got together and we went to my job and we wrote another song. So we were like, man, this is crazy. Like, you know, after all that time, we still was able to, you know, to do stuff like that. So that fell in line with, you know, with Tom coming back. And then he asked like, hey, do you know a singer? And then I said, yeah, I think I know a singer for that. And then, you know, Allie can kind of just take it from there.
And then he said what she looked like.
Yeah. And so
I was like,
and so I texted her about it, and he's like, yeah, man, what she look like? And then Allie's sense of humor, she sent him a picture of her on the toilet. and then
now we're best friends.
Oh man, so I texted the Tom and he said, okay, I guess so. You know, he said something. He's like, he couldn't believe. I said, well, yeah, man, that's her sense of humor. So deal with it, you know. And it was great. So after that point, we got together, the three of us, and we just started working on stuff. I don't know if it ended up being like Sleazy or Wanted or one of the songs. We just showed it to Tom and he picked it up instantly, and then we went from there. So then our first show ended up being October, Halloween, 2015. It was like in the basement. So we did it, and that was as a 3-piece. And then at that point, we were settled on just that was going to be the band. And then I got a text from Matt saying that he was coming back he was overseas. He said, I'm coming back. Hey, I really like how we used to jam and do the stuff with our old band. Would you be interested in doing something again at some point? And so that's when I said, well, I got this new thing. I think you could be really good to join that. And the guys were hesitant at first because we were just playing the two of us with that, and that was working. But I said, no, he'll be really great. He'll give me an opportunity to be able to be freer on the guitar. So I can do solos and do just, you know, be crazy and stuff like that. And he came to a practice and it didn't work at first because it was a different dynamic when you're used to songs that are written without bass. So I just had an idea. I said, why don't we jam on this old song that we wrote that used to play on, and I think it might work for Allie. So then he already knew the chords to that song, and that ended up being Beauty and the Struggle that she ended up writing, but Matt knew how to play it, and so it just gelled off since he had already knew the chords, and then the rest was history after that.
And it worked out really well. Like, I think we would have been crazy not to like have Matt like join the band. So I was really glad that Tommy made it happen.
Yeah, sure. And we just started. We went with it at that point, because you know, at one thing I knew that like since we loved the White Stripes and the Black Keys and the Kills, I didn't want us to be stuck in that kind of that just drums and guitar thing, because you know we were gonna get those comparisons anyway, just because of the the influence and the, you know, it being classic rock and blues influence. So I wanted to at least have bass, so then we could be able to expand things more and kind of go beyond that sound, like how Jack was able to do with Dead Weather.
Yeah, and even though basic also brings in a little bit of more of an atmospheric vibe. So maybe sometimes just drum and guitar could be a little limiting. And Matt coming in kind of brought the whole thing together.
Right, especially for like our psychedelic slower songs that you see on the second side of the record. You can really hear the importance of bass a little bit more. But hopefully we did that fast enough to explain stuff.
That's great, and you're totally right. Like the psychedelic stuff in the second half of your debut is just beautiful.
Thank you.
So speaking of the debut, what was it like creating it?
So we had a few songs already under our belt that we knew we wanted to put on the album. And then pandemic hit, we couldn't really practice much, couldn't really get together and write. So me and Tommy had to figure it out, and we would have calls, and he would play and I would try to write, and it's actually pretty difficult to do that when you're not used to doing stuff like that, because I guess like trying to sing and then trying to play guitar, but you're on the phone, so there's like can be quite a delay.
Yeah.
And but we were able to do it. I was able to write. We would send each other voice notes back and forth, so we knew what we were doing already. And we were just like trying to piece it together as much as we can before we recorded, because we really wanted to be prepared. Because we initially wanted to be able to record the album in a week, so we wanted to make sure everything was like ready to go by the time we got there. And then when we did get together, it was really great because Matt and Tom just fit right in, because they didn't get to hear the stuff before Tommy brought it. Like so when we finally got to the studio, we had one day to like rehearse things and just get our feet wet. So we did that, and Tom and Matt, it's like they already knew the songs and knew what to do. You know, so we practiced, and then ended up writing one of the songs on the album on the spot.
Yeah, the song You.
Yeah, we wrote You on the spot because Tommy is like a vending machine for riffs, and he just had a riff. He's just like, he was just testing his guitar. He wasn't even trying to, I don't think you were trying to show us the song. You were just playing.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to do it. I was just testing because Tom was angry about messing up on a part, and he was like, and he was frustrated. And so I'm just like killing time trying to do something. And I was like, what was that? Is that one of the, because keep in mind, we hadn't seen each other in like 5 months, no practice, no anything. And like Ali said, only one of the songs we were playing live, and that was Coward Soul, which is their first song. So that was the only song that we had played live and that everyone knew. But the other 9 songs were totally new to Tom and Matt. And to be able to record that, and they literally had to learn the songs in like one day. So it's like you get a movie role and you got to learn all the lines the day before you go to shoot. So, you know, it wasn't easy to do that. So during the course of killing time, I'm just doing stuff on the guitar that I'd already had. And it was like, is that one of, so at the time they were like, is that one of the 10 or one of the 9 rather, you know? And I was like, no, that's just something that's just something for, because a pedal company had sent me a pedal, and that was one of the riffs that I had made up to demonstrate the pedal. And I just stuck with it because I just liked it. It was cool. And then they dug it. So then Ali started writing, and the next thing you know, we had You, which ended up being one of our I really love how that song came out, you know, the whole aspect of it. You know, it was great. So it was definitely new, like Ali said, writing a whole record remotely and via the phone was new and different. But then it also the fun part about it makes me remind about the Kills and how they had to, like, you know, they couldn't text each other stuff. Jamie literally had to send stuff, you know, cassettes via mail, and she had to, and then, you know, you had to wait for them. Alison had to wait for the cassettes in order to be able to do stuff. So, you know, we had more at our fingertips than a lot of people have had, but it was still difficult because we weren't used to it. But you know, we loved the challenge of it. And you know, Sabbath, I think they believe they recorded their first record in like 1 week. And so it, you know, a lot of the old bands, they were able to go in the studio and just, because we don't play the clicks, we don't use computers, so everything is raw and live. And that's actually helped us because we're used to performing under that type of pressure and just, you know, cutting stuff really fast. And you can kind of feel it on the record. You could feel the, you know, the angst or
the live like feel, because it is live. I did scratch vocals while they were playing, and then the next day, was it the next day? No, yeah. Same day. Yeah. 2 days of me also doing regular vocals like over their tracks, and I would sing over the tracks, and any little mistake that we spotted, I would start the song over again, all the way through without
no punching in. Start the whole song, so you just do the whole song over. And even with the guitar solos on the record, that's all one take. Those are all the first take of like, because it just flowed in that moment, and it wasn't like I wasn't going to worry about doing it over. So it was the epitome of feeling like you were doing a rock and roll record. And I think that's what we loved. We felt like we were pushing ourselves to make something, you know, great, you know.
And I think it was as organic as we could make it, and I'm really proud of that. So.
Sick. So 1 month from it's like nearly 1 month on from its release. What's the reaction been like to the album?
Well, I haven't heard no negatives. I think a lot of people have been hitting me up, even people that don't necessarily listen to rock music. I have cousins and sisters and friends that they're not into rock and roll, but they do love, you know, R&B and hip hop or like soul music, more softer tones. And they gave the album a chance because they love me, but they'll tell me that they love they love Liquid. Like I keep hearing that people love the song Liquid, and then I have to tell them what the song's about, and they're like, ew, oh.
Yeah, I think what's happened with I've noticed with a lot of people is that it's been a lot of like shock. A lot of people, it's kind of like who found it, they're like, where did this come from? Where did this band come from? Like, I didn't know about this, you know, and like it's hit people with a breath of fresh air as far as for like rock and roll, and especially for the genre that we do like classic rock, you know, original songs. And that can be tiresome to people. It can be kind of like a lot of people, you know, they don't easily get into that. And I think that we've been able to create a fresh spin on it, but yet it's still, what Allie and I try to do is try to create records and songs that if it was 1967, it could still be on the charts. Not something where you're making something now and it's good only because the competition is so low. Only right. Because the demographic is so bad that anything remotely good is gonna feel good to people. So we try to make it, well, could this beat go toe to toe with Jefferson Airplane album, or could this go to toe, you know, could it do that? And I think that's what we try to do, to make something timeless so that people can hear it 20 years from now and it'll still feel just as good and just as good as it does now. So I think that's something we try to be conscious about, just making timeless music rather than trying to just be about algorithms and playlists and stuff like that, because, you know, that's just not us, you know.
And I think it also was I think to make something timeless and it felt effortless, it was because me and the guys all have different music tastes. We all love many different genres, and we love the same, but we also have other things that we love. And I think we take that into account when we're creating music, and whoever we're influenced by at the moment or whatever comes into the creative process, and it ends up being timeless because we're basically combining everything that we love and putting it into this like little pot of rock and roll, and it came out amazing. I couldn't be happier with what we did. I'm very proud.
Yeah, I hope it can, like, you know, I hope it, I feel like it's the best debut rock album that's come out in a long time. It's really something where I find myself listening to it, and I forget that I'm in the band. I forget that I'm a part of it, and that's really important to feel that way, because we're fans first. We're fans of the music. We're fans of the stuff. So
not of algorithms.
Yeah.
Music.
Right. Fans of this stuff. So that was a good thing, and I'm happy that it's touching people in a positive way, it's uplifting people, and it's giving people something to actually cheer about. Because every day you hear that rock and roll is dead. Every day you hear that people
there's no bands anymore.
There's no bands and stuff like
where
that.
are you, sir?
Right, and we're like,
where
nah.
do you live?
They're like, no.
Plenty of bands.
Yeah, you just gotta.
The Room 5 a band?
Right. Yeah. Right.
Are they a band?
So that's kind of how we feel.
No, that's great. And I can definitely tell like the passion, not just from chatting with you guys about music, but also definitely within the record. And spoilers, it's definitely on my album of the year list already.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
I mean, I'm a classic rock girl. I mean, I'm basically called Dad Rock at one of my places.
Oh, that's so true, though. That's funny. That's awesome.
So what is the rock scene like in New York? I've never been to New York, so I know, travesty, but...
Pretty terrible. I mean, to be honest, it's pretty bad. It's not a place for... It's not a place for us in terms of the type of music, because, being in Brooklyn, living in Brooklyn, and working at a rehearsal studio, I got to see every single band that it had to offer. And there wasn't nothing close or like what we were doing. And that's not a bad thing. It's just that, it was like really keyboard heavy stuff, and indie rock and experimental and those type of things, which is cool. We dig all those type of things. But as far as the venues and stuff like that,
yeah,
they were very, very kind of like weird in terms of like they weren't into being, not all, but some weren't into the idea of making things for everybody. We would send someone like our stuff, and they said, "Oh, when something like this comes around, we'll get back to you and about a show." And it was like, well, there isn't anything like this right now, so maybe we should just change the music just so we can play the show. Or I mean, like, so it was whack.
The fact that we didn't have management from on a bigger scale would determine whether or not we can get a show like that. That can't possibly be your screening process. Like, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah, it was just whack. So what I started doing was, Allie and I started getting bands and people that we knew and going to the venues and putting in our early stages, we just started creating our own bills and our own nights and just giving people an eclectic mix of stuff. And we did that for 2-3 months or so, and that worked. It brought a lot of bands together, and the venues couldn't say no because we were doing their job as far as
we're creating the bills.
We're creating the bills. And when I mean venues, I mean the smaller scale ones, because the bigger scale venues, like if you think about the Webster Hall or the Rough Trade and stuff like that, they wouldn't even look at something like us unless they got a stamp of approval from someone, or unless someone told them it was cool. So
the hipster mafia.
Yeah, we ended up calling it the hipster mafia, because if you weren't in that clique of stuff, you weren't going to be, able to play. And we didn't care, because we was like, we just going to keep doing our thing and keep playing. But it was the lack of, I guess, love of rock and roll that you saw to decline in New York. That's the mecca of all this type of stuff. But we found that if you were a band from Texas, or if you were a band from California, you got more love than a band that's from the city itself. And that was really an interesting dynamic to see. But with that being said, there was great places like Arlene's Grocery that allowed us to do our thing. Rockwood, so there was a few that were
actually lucky. They gave us some freedom to try to put things together in a way that was convenient for us.
Right, to be able to play. But it was just so much, there was so much BS, and you see how the rock and stuff deteriorates because the venues themselves, they didn't care about music, so to speak. They just wanted people to be there, but they wouldn't do any promotion for that. So each night the shows would be, no one would turn out because they didn't do any promotion, but they wanted everyone to do everything for them. So after we played these places a bunch of times, and we had like almost 100 people on like a Tuesday night, stuff like that, but still couldn't get a Saturday night after doing stuff like that, we said, man, we said, F it, we'll go underground and just keep writing songs, and with the idea that hopefully we could open up for a bigger band or something like that when they came into town. But most of the time they already came with someone. They didn't do that type of stuff. So it's a tough situation, and me and Al are really blunt and frank with stuff. We're not going to like sugarcoat it and make it sound nicer than what it is. The percentage of decent venues is much lower than they are good venues that actually care about New York bands and showing New York talent. But yet when the pandemic hit, these were the same venues that would send us emails begging for money. But the only reason why they had our email is because we would reach out to them about playing and get no response back. So
right.
It was just like, you're jumping on the bandwagon of people who are actually struggling musicians.
You want to save your venue, but this is a venue that you wouldn't even welcome us and have not just us, but like
right.
other bands. Just bands in general.
Right, Allie's absolutely right. Just bands in general. You wanted to put yourself in the same classification as a girl who was playing in the coffee shops to help pay her rent and doing that. No, you're not that person. You know what I mean? So it's good venues that needed help, but then there was a lot of ones that said, "Hey, we need help." And me and Allie are getting emails like, "Hey, I just got an email from such and such." And he's like, "Yeah, I did too." It's like, but wait, isn't this the same place that we emailed 5 times and never heard anything from? Not even a hello. But yet we were the only band in Brooklyn that had Classic Rock Magazine, that had Village Voice, that had all this press that they never even looked at. They just never even looked at. And it was like, damn, you realize like we're in magazines and we don't have a manager, but like, what's wrong with y'all? It was almost, so it told us that they didn't care about the music.
Yeah, and it's disheartening because you think New York City, I mean, how many rock bands came out of New York City? How many, you had like the CBGBs, you had like Patti Smith living in New York City and talking about, all she talks about is rock and roll. So how could you not want like bands playing in venues in New York where so many rock stars have come and gone and lived, and all of this is interesting to me.
Yeah, right. So, I love the Strokes. That's one of the reasons why I started playing guitar. And so, but people forget this is a New York band, you know what I mean? But it's a difference from when they came out and how we are now in New York. And New York's kind of lost that love that was bubbling when the Strokes and like yeahs and those bands were brewing out of, New York City. But, it doesn't matter. We're still going to kick the doors down. We like doing that more than going through an open door anyway.
Who would you say are your major influences in your sound and style?
Well, for me per se, it changes from time to time just because I really love music, and all my influences are like just a mixture of people from different genres. Like obviously I love Jack White and Alison Mozart a lot, and then I loved Tina Turner when I was growing up. My dad had like VHS cassettes of concerts. So we would watch a lot of Madonna, and Phil Collins was like my, that was just because of what he can do with his voice, and the music itself was just amazing to me. I listened to a lot of Bob Marley growing up, and then on my mother's side, she loved like old school, like soul and a lot. My mom's Puerto Rican, so freestyle is like, that was her hotbed. And freestyle music every day. So I grew up listening to a bunch of that stuff. And then as I got older, before I even got into classic rock, I was into like the newer age rock stuff. So I like loved like like Linkin Park and Flyleaf and all of those type of bands. And then I think it wasn't like maybe like the year before I graduated high school, I found out about like the White Stripes. And I always knew I wanted to be a singer. I always wanted to sing, but I didn't know what kind of music I wanted to make. And none of the music that I did listen to or loved was what I wanted to do. I wanted to do something a little more hard, something more aggressive, something more wild than what I listened to. And I do have to say, like, Jack White is one of my biggest influences, just because of the way he moves on stage, what he does with his voice. You know, he makes little characters, and maybe I might have copied him a few times. Like, and you know, I was into all of that stuff. And then I met Tommy, and he opened my mind to like a whole world of new artists, and we helped each other dig in to you know, who do we like? Okay, who do they like? And who did those people like? And you know, so that's why my influences change from time to time. I can't even name people at this point.
That's awesome.
And what about you, Tommy?
I mean, I guess it's very broad in terms of like, because I didn't get into rock and roll music until college, until film school. Because prior to that, I was just into just soul music, because we grew up with my dad, and he's a jazz and soul guy, so that's all he played. So it's just Motown, the Stax, and the Philadelphia International, and all the old school rhythm and blues, Miles Davis and Thelonious Monk. Because I wanted to be a jazz pianist at one point, so I was listening to a lot of Oscar Peterson and a lot of Thelonious Monk. And then I was in film school, and then I found out about, because MTV, they were doing like You Hear It First at the time. So they would, like, I think it was on the top of the, like with 10 minutes to the hour, they would put the news flash and, you know, let you know about new stuff. And then I remembered hearing about, then they did one on this guy named Cody Chestnut. And I was like, man, who's this? This black dude looks really cool, man. And then they showed him on, and it was like, sounds like Al Green meets Kravitz. And then they interviewed him, and then they showed him on stage with the Strokes. I was like, who are the Strokes? Who are these people? So both of those two bands, him and the Strokes, was my like gateway into like getting into rock. And what was cool about that is that they were doing retro rock. So hearing about Cody Chestnut, I was able to find out about a lot of the old like Rolling Stones and stuff like that. And then seeing the Strokes, they were able to turn me on into the Stooges and like Velvet Underground and Lou Reed and all that cool stuff. So at that point, what I did at that point, I just went to the local library. It was a library that had, you know, you could rent CDs, DVDs, and so forth. And then they had turntables and stuff set up where you could just go there and listen to music. So at that point, I just went there and started from like the beginning of like rock and roll, because they would have like box sets and stuff. And I would just go to the library and be there from when they opened up at like 9 until when they closed at like 9. I would just listen to music. I started with like Little Richard and all that, the Bo Diddley, Chuck Berry, all that stuff. And then when I moved that, then I started getting into 60s rock and Hendrix stuff. And I was like, oh my God, this is. And then I got into the 70s punk. And then I got into the Ramones and T-Rex and David Bowie. And I was just going crazy, just feeding my brain with all this type of stuff, because I wanted to know rock and roll. And then I started to see that I was already into the stuff, but didn't know it because a lot of the, you know, with the soul music. So it was just great for me to just learn about music. I just love how, like Ali and I was talking about, I like to find out who an artist likes and then hear about who, and then find that person and kind of hear them and stuff. So I went through the gauntlet of all that stuff until I was able to find out what did I like. And then I found myself liking, I was one time a big Cure fan, and Joy Division and post-punk. So I was into that. And I was just all about like dark wave. And then I got into like French post-punk, and I was wearing all black, and I was really in. And then I saw the Joy Division movie, and then I was like doing that. So I was doing like keyboard stuff. And I was playing keyboard stuff. So I always just found myself more into like the darker music. So from the post-punk had a big reggae influence, and it had like the bass lines and stuff like that. So somehow that drew me back to the blues. So then I got more influences in blues, and then I was into Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf and all the darker edge blues stuff. And then when I found out about Black Keys and how they liked all the older blues artists, and I was just really just in Jack White, I was like, oh man, this guy's cool. He's doing like stuff with the guitar, and you know, and it was just an eye opener. So the blues stuff happened, and then I loved all the funk with the James Brown and all the stuff my dad was listening to and Otis Redding. And then the Hendrix stuff just changed my mind. It changed my life because I was just like, this is just amazing. I was like, this guy looks really cool. You know what I mean? And he sounds awesome. But then who's Bob Dylan? Because he keeps talking about Bob Dylan. And he's like wearing his hair like Bob Dylan. They say, and they're doing this. So it's like, then I got into Bob Dylan. And so it's like, you just learn so much from all the greats. And then I went through my Beatles phase when everything was just like Beatles.
I had a Beatles phase.
You know, and it still is. I still love all this stuff. But then it always came back to the blues. It came back. Then I got into Funkadelic. And then I found Eddie Hazel, who was like a street, almost like punk version of Jimi Hendrix. And I was like, man, I really love how he took from Hendrix what he loved, but turned it into more of a proto hip hop almost vibe. And so then I loved, like we was talking about the Kills and how Jamie plays guitar. He's a really underrated guitar player because he's so creative how he thinks with using guitar. He's completely different than Jack White, but still is able to do like the blues and stuff. So I've always wanted to be that type of way. I wanted to have influences, but draw from stuff. And then I'm a big Stooges fan, and then I loved the Stooges. And then I got into Kiss, and then I loved Kiss. I loved Ace Frehley. So I was like, how can I do all this stuff? How can I like combine it where it's just natural? And it just, you know, she was that vehicle because she was able to take things and make things so fresh. Whereas like I could do a riff that was like really like Jimmy Page, you know, influenced by that. But because she's a girl or lady, you know, excuse me, she's influenced by different stuff. It flips it up rather than if a guy was singing that was trying to like mimic Robert Plant, it just messes the song up. Whereas she flips the script on it, which now allows me to have more freedom to say, okay, so if I got like a Jimmy Page verse, well, I'll do a Funkadelic chorus, you know, and I haven't heard stuff like that. I haven't heard that merger so then I got into Sabbath. I was like, how can we do like a Sabbath, like a Tony Iommi, if him and Jimi Hendrix were like jamming? And I was like, oh, I'll do something like that. I've never heard anything like that. So I just started to create this sound, and it took me a long time to the point to where once we finally started recording and doing our EPs, I knew who I was then. Then I was like, okay, wow, I actually have my sound, where you hear the influence, but this guy's taking it to a different level because you've never heard like a Hendrix with Sabbath type of thing. You never heard these type of things coming into play. And it's just, I just like love music, you know, and I just try to show that. And I'm like, with all the folk, I love Richie Havens. I love Donovan. I love
Donovan.
Love Donovan. Love T-Rex. I'm like a bigger Mark Bolan fan than I am a David Bowie fan. And you know what I mean? So it's like, you know what I mean? So whereas like she loves the White Stripes and I love the Black Keys. So you can kind of like, so it's always that.
It all comes together really well.
Right. It all comes together. So for this record, so it's a lot of influence of that type of psychedelic, old 60s nugget psychedelic music with the Hendrix, the Funkadelic, the Tony Iommi Sabbath stuff, and putting that, and that became me. That became my sound, where I could literally put myself on a record and someone would say, that's Tommy from Lovehoney. And I think that's what makes a really great guitarist, is that you can hear their influences, but yet at the same time, they're different from the next guy. You know, Dan Auerbach is completely different than Jack White, but yet they do the same genre, but they have a different sound. And so that's what I've been able to do with that, you know, is to be able to take the Hendrix sound and put different flares on it that people aren't accustomed to hearing. Like you were saying about Jefferson Airplane. I love Gray Slick. You know, I love those old records. So how can we swirl that into the mix and do stuff like that. But just being that type of nerd of music is just, it's a lot. But Ali appreciates because we're the same way. We can just talk about that stuff. We could talk about records all day, and that's the fun of music.
We do.
Yeah, we do, and we do it for fun.
Going back to what like Tommy was saying about finding a sound, I think that's what I was trying to say. Like growing up, loving all these artists that sang with so much soul, but the instrumentals necessarily weren't what I was looking for my voice. And then I didn't know that you can sing with soul and over hard guitar riffs, and then that would be called rock and roll. So like when I was growing up, James Brown was considered godfather of soul, but to me it sounds like rock music. Same thing with Tina Turner. Like to me, Ike and Tina were a rock band. And so when me and Tommy got together, he made me think yeah, that's what that is, exactly what it is. And then I started listening to Black Sabbath and Led Zeppelin and all of that, and I was like, they're singing, this is soul vocals with hard guitar riffs. I could do this. Let's go.
Subscribe. Subscribe.